It started as an ordinary Sunday, one of those quiet afternoons when the world feels suspended between memory and silence. I had promised myself for months to clean out my mother's attic, but I never found the courage. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find there, the ghosts of childhood packed in boxes, still waiting to be touched. The air was heavy with dust and the faint scent of cedar. Light spilled through a small round window, illuminating stacks of old magazines, yellowed letters, and photographs wrapped in rubber bands. I opened one box and began sorting through the pictures: birthdays, summer picnics, the sea. Then one photo stopped me cold. It was a beach I didn't recognize, waves rising behind a group of people. In the center, a man kneeling beside a small girl wrapped in a towel, her face pale and frightened. The girl was me. I must have been 5, maybe 6. The man's face, half turned toward the light, was impossible to see clearly. Only the outline of his profile. Strong, kind, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. I ran my fingers over the faded surface. My mother had never told me about this. I didn't remember almost drowning. But something deep inside me stirred. Not fear, but recognition. Like a memory that had been waiting to surface. On the back of the photo, in my mother's handwriting, were 3 words: the man who saved her. I sat there for a long time, the attic silent around me, the photo trembling slightly in my hands. I didn't know it yet, but that image, that single frozen moment, was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my past, my marriage, and the strange invisible ways love can find us before we even know it exists. That night, I couldn't sleep. The photograph lay on my bedside table, catching the light from the street outside. I kept turning it over, studying every detail: the shape of the man's shoulders, the sunlight on the waves, the towel wrapped around my tiny arms. I tried to remember the moment, but my mind was blank. It was as if someone had gently erased that page from my memory. By morning, curiosity had turned into something stronger, an ache, a need to know who he was. I've been a journalist for nearly 20 years, trained to chase truth through archives, interviews, and long nights of silence. But this time, the story wasn't for a headline. It was for me. I started with my mother's old photo albums. Nothing. Then I found a notebook where she had kept small clippings from local newspapers: births, weddings, small-town news. One yellowed page from the Galway Herald caught my eye. Local lifeguard saves child from drowning, July 1989. No names mentioned, only a young man visiting from Dublin. My heart raced. That night, I called the local library. The woman on the other end sounded tired but kind. "I'll check the archives," she said. "If you were that child, maybe we'll find your rescuer too." Days passed. I could barely focus on work. My editor complained that my latest story lacked fire. He didn't know that all my fire was buried under that one photograph. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the beach again. Not as an image now, but as a feeling. The salt, the wind, the strange safety of being pulled from chaos by unseen hands. Then came the call. "We found the full article," the librarian said. The rescuer's name was Michael Turner. He was 21, a visiting student. It says he moved abroad shortly after. The name hit me like thunder. Michael Turner, my husband. For a moment, everything around me disappeared. The papers, the ticking clock, the noise of traffic below. Michael, my late husband, the man I met 20 years later in another city, had saved me once before. Long before we ever said hello. I sat there, breathless, the photo trembling in my hands, realizing that maybe love had found me long before I even knew its name. For a long time, I just sat there, the phone still in my hand, the librarian's words echoing in my head. Michael Turner, 21, visiting student. It didn't seem possible. My Michael had been a journalist too, quiet and steady, a man who preferred listening to speaking. He never mentioned working as a lifeguard, never told stories about saving a child. But then again, he never liked talking about himself. That night, I went to the study. His study. The room still smelled faintly of ink and old paper, the scent that used to cling to him after long days at the newsroom. I opened the drawers one by one, searching for some trace of connection. In the bottom drawer, beneath a pile of notebooks, I found a small wooden box I had never opened before. Inside were old photographs, some from his university days, others from his early reporting trips. And there it was, the same beach, the same year, written in his handwriting, Galway, 1989. In one photo, he stood by the shore, young and smiling, sunlight on his face. I pressed the two photographs together, his and mine, and the pieces of our lives began to align like constellations, finally seen from the right angle. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "You knew, didn't you?" Had he recognized me when we met years later at that journalism conference in London? The way he looked at me that day, calm, certain, as if he'd known me before. I had thought it was chemistry. Maybe it was memory. I remembered our wedding day when he'd told me, "You were always meant to find me." I laughed back then, thinking it was just something romantic to say. Now I wasn't so sure. I sat there, surrounded by his old papers and fading photographs, realizing that love sometimes begins before we are ready to meet it, before we can understand it. The photo wasn't just a memory. It was proof of something deeper. Something that had been written in both our stories long before we had learned to read it. And for the first time since he died, I felt not loss, but wonder. The quiet kind that makes you believe in fate again. In the days that followed, I carried those two photographs everywhere I went, tucked carefully in my notebook, close to my heartbeat. Every time I looked at them, I asked myself the same question. How many times do our lives cross invisible lines before we notice? I walked through the city with new eyes. Every stranger passing by could be part of someone's future in ways they'd never imagine. Every moment, even the forgotten ones, might hold a meaning waiting to reveal itself years later. I thought about that day on the beach. The waves, the panic, the moment my small hands slipped beneath the water. I had always assumed the important events of my life began much later. Graduation, my first job, the day I met Michael. But now I knew the truth. Our story started long before I could read or speak his name. He saved me without knowing who I would become. And I loved him without knowing he had once saved me. There was something profoundly beautiful in that. Love arriving early, waiting patiently, choosing the moment to be recognized. I spent hours sitting at his desk, touching the letters of his name carved into old notebooks. I tried to picture him as a young man, running across the sand, diving into the waves to pull a frightened little girl back into the world. What did he think afterward? Did he wonder if she lived a good life? Did he ever imagine that life would someday become his own? People often say that love is a choice we make, but now I'm not sure. Maybe love is also a path, one we step onto long before we understand where it leads. Maybe some hearts are destined to find each other, even if the universe has to try more than once. As I held the photographs in my hands, I whispered, "You found me twice." And in that quiet moment, I felt something shift inside me, not grief, not longing, but a soft, glowing gratitude that reached deeper than tears. He had been my beginning, and somehow, without either of us knowing, I had been his too. 2 weeks later, I drove to the coast, the same coastline where my story almost ended and where his story quietly began. The road curved along the sea, the waves glittering under the afternoon sun, like they were welcoming me back. I carried the photographs in a small envelope, held close to my chest, as if they were the most fragile truth I'd ever known. When I reached the beach, the wind smelled of salt and childhood. I slipped off my shoes and walked toward the shoreline, the cold water brushing against my feet in gentle waves. Somewhere here, in this vast and restless blue, a young man pulled a small girl from the edge of disappearance. And somewhere years later, that girl found him again, not by fate's accident, but by destiny's design. I sat on a smooth stone and took out the pictures. The sunlight touched them, just as it had once touched his face. "Thank you," I whispered, "not just for saving me, but for loving me, for choosing me again long after that day on the sand." For a moment, grief came, but it didn't have teeth anymore. It didn't crush me. It just reminded me that love, once given, doesn't vanish with a heartbeat. It lingers. It changes shape. It becomes memory and strength, and a story worth telling. I closed my eyes and imagined him standing where I stood, the wind in his hair, his eyes searching the sea. I imagined that maybe, in some quiet corner of time, he was still watching over me, smiling at the secret we finally uncovered. Then I spoke the words I had carried for so long. "You saved me twice. First from the ocean, then from a life without you." The waves answered softly, rolling in and out, as if the sea itself understood. I placed the envelope beneath a piece of driftwood, not to lose it, but to let the memory rest where it started. And as I walked away, I realized something beautiful. Some loves don't end. They simply return, in photographs, in memories, in the quiet certainty that we were meant to find each other all along. And with every step, I felt lighter, as if the sea had given me back my future too.